What's up guys, JayzTwoCents here, and we're going to do a video that I've been asked to do a bajillion times. Like literally a bajillion, I counted. You guys have been asking me how to do hardline tubing tutorial, and I didn't want to just take random tube and start bending it for the sake of a tutorial. I want the tube to go in something. So I decided that we need to go ahead and do an upgrade to Coconut Monkey's computer. Because if you guys remember, I did a tutorial about how to install a basic water cooling kit, and we used the AlphaCool loop. And unfortunately, AlphaCool's tubing and radiators are... The radiator's good, it's just it has a shit ton of flux in there. And as you can see, the clear fluid and clear tubing has turned a lovely shade of aquamarine. We don't want that. So we're gonna go ahead and do a hardline tube upgrade to his system, and I figured we'd show you guys how to do it in the meantime. Today I'm going to show you guys how to do some hardline bending tutorials, but speaking of tutorials, if you guys want to kind of learn about anything pretty much that you can imagine on the internet, head over to my sponsor for today's video, lynda.com/Jay. You guys can learn pretty much anything from their thousands of online videos and even more written tutorials about any subject you can think of. There's photography, automotive repair, there's programming, there's computer building. If you guys don't like my videos, go and check out theirs. Computer building, even like home decorating, cooking, anything you guys can think of. You guys know you get done with my videos and you go and check out like how to do doilies and stuff. Don't lie, I won't judge, I do it. Right now, head on over to lynda.com/Jay and get your free membership trial and start using it right now and learn something new. In fact, if you guys have been using lynda.com, put it in the comments of this video what it is you guys have been learning about. Maybe I can learn a thing or two. But right now, free trial, lynda.com/Jay, link in the description. Go and do it and become smarter now. Like literally, be smarter than me. It's not hard. All right, so how to bend hardline. You know, we'll start with this. There are two types of hardline tubes out there. There is PETG and there is acrylic. Both of them have their pros and both of them have their cons. I'm not gonna get into that. I've already done a video on that. Go and check it out. Click the little magnifying glass on my channel and just look up PETG and you will find any video about hardline. Now PETG and acrylic both have their pros and their cons. If you guys wanna know more about that, check out the video I did on that. We'll keep this video a watchable length and not get too in depth on that. But basically PETG is just plastic infused acrylic, which makes it much more flexible. As you can see, it's not gonna crack as easy. It's easier to work with. It melts and bends at a lower temperature. I say melt, but really that's what you're doing when you bend it, is you're melting it, and you're keeping its shape by inserting some sort of a silicone insert, which is what we've got right here. I've got two of these. One is sanded down, one is not, and basically that's just because there's some tolerances between the two. I like PETG because it's also very prone to not breaking and shattering, which right there, if I did that with acrylic, would have broken. In fact, I've got proof of that right here, because you can see that these are like all chipped and broken on the end, because right now if I was to do that, a piece would probably fly off, hit Coconut Monkey in the face, then he will sue me and my insurance rates will go up. He will become rich, and that's not the point of today's video. But when it comes to bending, there are some tools that you're going to need. I like to keep things really, really simple and basic. Some guys like to do the saw method, Monsoon, MMPC Tech. A lot of companies sell tools that you guys can use to cut this stuff, but I like to keep it really, really simple. This right here is a Cobalt. I got it from Lowe's, obviously, because it's Cobalt. This is a pipe cutter. And they have different types of blades you can put in here, but I just went and got this. It's like $9.99. It's a pipe cutter. And it's the same thing you would use to cut copper pipe. It works on PETG. You can't use it on acrylic though. In fact, let me demonstrate why. Let me grab a piece of acrylic here because I don't really use this stuff anymore. If I try to put this on acrylic, the way it works is you tighten this knob down, you turn it, you tighten it, you turn it. The problem is the moment you start to crank on it and cut it, it looks like, oh, okay, we're gonna cut. Yay, we're cutting. The problem is once you start to crank it, it's going to crack. Did you hear that? And this is now, unfortunately, what it looks like. Acrylic is very, very similar to glass, and it's like a plastic glass, if you will. In fact, acrylic's not even technically a glass or a plastic, it's more like a glass. So anyway, that's why we don't do that. But PETG, anyway, I've got a piece of PETG right here somewhere. That's also acrylic. I've got so much cylindrical stuff hanging out in here. Don't ask why. But anyway, this is PETG, and one of the ways that you can tell the difference is by looking at it from the side. PETG has a slight bluish tinge to it, where acrylic is going to look very clear like glass. But I like to use this because it makes cutting a lot simpler. You can mark it with like a pen, or I like to put a scratch where I want to cut, and then just use this to cut it. And then to clean up the inside, I just use a step bit, because one of these steps is perfect for the diameter of the tube. Just turn it by hand like that, and it will just shave the PETG. Very simple. Part of the problems with PETG though versus acrylic is it's very soft. And the problem is if you try and get one of those outer tools that Monsoon actually sells one where it will cut the inside and the outside by just kind of turning it. The problem is that chatters and the blade will skip and jump, and you don't get a very clean cut. So that's why I like to use these two tools. This is a very clean outer bend. This is a very clean outer cut. This is a very clean inner cut, and that's what you want. Other thing you're going to need, obviously, a heat gun. This is a very cheap Wagner. I would recommend spending a couple of extra bucks and getting the one that has the big base so that it will sit on your desk and not flop and move around on you, and it's weighted. That would be actually a lot easier. But really, this is just a hairdryer on freaking steroids. That's all it is, and it gets really hot. In fact, right now we'll show you the methods for bending, how to know when the temperature is right for bending, and then what happens when you overheat it or underheat it, because that's the most common problem I see is people bend too soon. It's not hot enough when they bend and they get flat spots, and that looks terrible. The flip side is when it gets too hot, then it bubbles and blisters, and that's obviously terrible too. So let's go ahead, hook this stuff up, and then I'll show you a little bit how to do some of the bending. And then what we'll do here is we'll kind of do a sort of a build montage. You guys know I like to do of upgrading Coconut Monkey's PC, because I kind of wanted this to be a twofer. Make his PC look better and show you guys how to do it in the meantime. So let's get started. All right, so I just set my gun up like this. This one's kind of tippy. Be careful. This end gets very, very hot. As you can see, things have melted to it, including some of the skin from my thumb. You guys don't want that. Very, very hot things are hot. But anyway, most heat guns have 2 speeds. Some of the higher end ones have 3, actually temperatures. So you got a medium and a high. Let's go ahead and do this actually. Let me take a piece of the acrylic, break that off right here. And I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like. Do you see how easy I just broke that off? I mean, literally, this is one of the reasons why we don't use acrylic that much anymore in the modding world. Once it gets any sort of a crack or a stress frac, you see, that's why acrylic is kind of scary. Now I'm gonna show you what it looks like when it starts to melt. I'm gonna put this on a medium heat. If I go high where this turns red hot, it's guaranteed to pretty much go from perfect temperature to overheated instantly. Sometimes if I want to get things going, I'll put it on high to get it kind of warmed up quickly, and then I'll move it down to medium. That way we don't get too hot too quickly. But let me go ahead and show you what it looks like if you try and bend it without an insert. Inserts are absolutely necessary. You have to have it. If you don't have it, then things are going to fail. Let me show you what it looks like if you try and do it without an insert. Okay, so the temperature is pretty much right for bending if I had an insert in there, but if I try and bend it without anything in there, you see what happens? It's very much like what happens to a garden hose if you don't have water in it. You guys know if you bend a garden hose without the water on, what happens? The hose just collapses. But the moment the water's on, the hose can't collapse because the space is filled. This is also how mandrel bent pipes for exhausts and things like that happen. So as you can see, this piece would now be ruined. There's no salvaging that. Let me go ahead and move on to another piece here. And let me show you what happens when the temperature isn't right, because that's also a very common thing that we've seen before. So I'm gonna go ahead and do a bend here towards the end where it's not hot enough. And we're going to show you what that looks like. So, because one of the most common things I get is, Jay, this is happening and I don't know why. So if you can see that the result of a certain imperfection when it comes to temperature, and you can say, oh, okay, that happened to my bend because it was too cold or too hot, that's going to be the most useful thing you're going to get today. Because I'm not going to be able to show you how to properly measure or how to determine where to do your bends, because I'll be honest, I don't measure at all. Everything I do is by eyeball. And I'm usually right the first time. It's more or less like an art. I mean, how does an artist paint their picture and just get it right? Because they just do. And I know that's not exactly, I just do, so therefore you should do. That's like the worst tutorial in history. So that's why I'm trying to show you some of the techniques, and then maybe you can develop, your own just do it Nike mentality when it comes to this. Anyway, I owe Nike like $18,000 now or something like that. One thing too that's really important is you'll notice here that I'm always rotating it. We don't want to get it too hot, so I'm always rotating it and I'm moving back and forth, because a common issue people do too is they only heat one spot. But the thing is, for the bend radius to be nice and smooth and even, you've got to have all the area along it also at the right temperature. Otherwise, you'll have variant in there where some of it cannot bend, some of it can. The outer portion of the radius has to be usually the hottest portion, because it's got the most stretch involved, where the inside is going to be kind of crushing on itself. So once I start to do my bend too, I'll heat up the outer radius more than the inside. What I'm also doing too is I'm kind of letting the weight of the tube, I don't want that to fall in my lap. I want maybe another kid. Anyway, I want the weight of the silicone insert and the tube to just kind of be dangling on it. That way I can tell when it's starting to become soft enough to bend. Because I think if you've ever tried this before, you start to ask yourself, like, is it hot enough? I can't tell. And you start trying to wiggle it. Then your bend radius might be off in the wrong spot. There's lots of things that can go wrong. But you can see now it is starting to bend a little bit right here. See that? Just a little bit, not much. I don't know if the camera can even get that, but it's starting to bend right there. So I'm going to keep rotating, rotating, rotating. If I want to get a little bit more intense heat, I can move it closer, move it farther away. I'd rather use the distance I am to the nozzle of the heat gun to control my temperature rather than turning the gun hotter. That's usually not the way we want to do things here.
A few moments later.
Okay, so as you can see here, it's starting to become malleable now. And sometimes I've seen some folks go, okay, this is the right time to start bending. And then they just start to bend. Well, do you see what happened right there? That kink that you're seeing right there is a result of two things. One, it's a result of being a very tight radius at too cold of a temperature and then moving it too fast. So this happens more so with acrylic than PETG, but PETG does it as well, where we were too cold and we tried to bend, and that's what happened. The other thing that would happen too is right here you would probably get a smooth radius and then a flat spot on either end, because again it would crush. This is obviously a piece of trash now. This is, I think a lot of people sent me pictures of this asking, why did it do that? What happened? What happens when it's too hot? Well, let me show you acrylic. Acrylic is probably the most dramatic result when it comes to being too hot, because it blisters up pretty bad. Let me go ahead and show you that. And we're going to put this one on red hot to show you guys, because I think a lot of people, they're impatient. They just want to start doing their bends. They want to get it done, and they really start to force their pipe a little bit too harsh, if you know what I'm saying there. You can take that however you want. But anyway, this is what too hot looks like. All right, so you're looking at this and you're going, okay, it's very flexible. Yay, my radius is fairly smooth. I mean, I got a little bit of a flat spot right there, but that's because I didn't heat it that much. It's still very malleable, so you're sitting here letting it cool, blowing on it. Don't dip it in water. If you dip this in water, it will just spider crack
everywhere.
So you want to sit here and hold it in the position you want it to be in while you're letting it cool. You can blow on it a little bit. Blow on your pipe. As you do, you can see it starts to get, as it cools, it gets more stiff and rigid. Trying to burn your lips. It sounds like a terrible tutorial about something else. And you go, okay, yes, I've got my bend. And you're like, oh, I can't get my tube out. Sometimes you might have to put a little bit of water in there. You can twist it as you twist and pull. And then you go, oh, man. And that's what you get. You get these wart-looking things on there. That's an example of overheated acrylic. Now, you get the same thing with PETG. The difference is the PETG bubbles are bigger. They're much more bigger to get more wavy rather than just being a straight-up blister like that. But also that, not only do you create these blisters, you also weaken that spot where it can just snap right off. Now, it may look like I actually pulled really hard on that. I really didn't. But do you notice it broke right where the blisters are? You see that? So you create a weak spot too when you overheat it. You create extra brittleness. So let's say this is a good piece right here. And something else you may have noticed is as it was bending, I was flipping it like this, and then I was doing the inner radius, and I was doing the outer radius, and I was kind of doing that. Because as it's starting to bend, I'm just kind of slowly working that angle so I get the radius that I want. You notice I'm not using a bending aid where some guys will take like a tube and they'll bend on the tube. It can collapse on itself and create a perfect 90 or 45 or whatever angle you want without having to worry about, you know, going against something. Sometimes you see people say use a toilet paper roll or something round like a pole or a desk leg. I don't do any of that. This is just the way I do it, just freehand, free form like this. But as you're starting to get the bend, you're going to want to start working the inside of the radius, the outer radius more than the inside, like I said, because that's where it's stretching the most. And then eventually you can get a very clean 90-degree angle. That's pretty much it. That is all I do when I do my hardline tubing. So let's go ahead and do this now. Let's get this system drained, and then let's make this thing look a lot better than it does now.
Transition.
But everything's in. It looks a hell of a lot better than it did before, obviously, with all of that stained tubing. Hand me a piece of that tubing right there. This tubing was clear when the build was done. Remember, we did this back in June of 2014, so it's been a year and a half, and this is what happened. But not only did the tubing, leach a little bit of plasticizer, this color is coming from the fact that the Alpha Cool radiator was not flushed, which is entirely my bad. Normally you would take vinegar or some sort of like a system prep, and then you would clean the system with an acid of some sort, and you wouldn't get this stuff. In fact, all of that crud is sitting here in this bowl, and you'll see that up close. This is what's in radiators most of the time, unless it's a brand that tends to clean their radiators before shipping. Alpha Cool does not, so make sure you clean your radiators. But bending the tubes and stuff is really not that big of a deal. It's like anything else. The more you practice, the easier it gets. This is the only bend that we did that we ended up not using. Everything else was a first-time attempt, but that's because I've been doing this now for so long that it's pretty easy. But anyway, that's pretty much it. Just make sure you keep an eye on your temperatures. Don't try and bend it when it's too cool. Keep an eye on it before it gets hot. You can not only modulate the temperature by turning your heat gun either on medium, low, or high, but you can also vary the temperature by how far away from the gun that you are. And make sure you heat up the sides of where you're going to bend to. Otherwise, you get flat spots, or it'll start to be a nice smooth radius, and then it will just kind of sharpen out really bad, and it'll look terrible if it's not, if heat's not evenly applied all the way around where the radius is going to be. But other than that, I hope this video has helped you guys. Like I said, I know it's not the best tutorial with hardline tubing, but down in the comments, why don't you guys tell us about your builds? If you follow me on Twitter, send me some pictures of your hardline tubing builds. And if you guys are using soft tubing and you want to avoid it looking like this in the future, then definitely make sure to kind of give hardline tubing a try. It's not as easy as just cutting the tube and plugging it in, and then clamping it down as soft tubing is, but the end result definitely looks a whole lot better. Anyway, time to get out of here, guys. Thanks for watching today's video. A little bit longer than the usual, but that's okay. I wanted you guys to learn something. Follow on social medias and all that stuff. And don't forget, check out lendo.com/Jay, and you guys can learn how to do really cool stuff and maybe even this in the future. Anyway, time to get out of here. See you in the next one.